Hey, welcome back to the Out of Spec podcast. I'm your host, Jordan, joined by co host Max, and we are here to talk about something that's been in our driveways, the Mercedes EQB. Now, Mercedes pitches this as a luxury SUV, and we're kind of here to debate that. And honestly, I don't know exactly where this conversation is going to go because, on some hands, that's kind of right, but also every time I drove this car, and I want to hear your input because you also just drove it. Um, is it really luxurious or is that just the Mercedes badge? What were your first impressions on your drive you just did from Fort Collins to your house?
Yeah, so that was about a 42-mile route. So just spent a little bit of time with it. I also drove the EQE as the U recently that we had, which is granted a more higher end Mercedes product. But this 350 4MATIC spec of the EQB I found to be comfortable, but not overly luxurious, not very high on tech features. And depending on who you are, maybe that's a good thing. It felt to me like this is a great, I don't want to stereotype too much, but mom spec car, or let's just say it's a car for someone who's not uh, super big on tech and EVs, because a lot of things about this Mercedes right away just told me, okay, this is easy to figure out. It's not very sophisticated. It's not super fancy like a tricked out EQE, EQS, or what have you.
Yeah, it's kind of that weird middle ground. And you have to think about the price, like what you're getting for your money. And on one hand, okay, you're getting a Mercedes SUV for only, in this case, 60 grand. That's cool. If you just tell people I drive an electric Mercedes SUV, they're going to suddenly have this weird respect for you because of the Mercedes badge. But if you stop and think about it, which I did because I just did the range test today, I was like, oh, when I start thinking about the options this one was equipped with, granted, it's how it was equipped, but that's how Mercedes sent it to us. It wasn't like we didn't ask for a base model, they just sent us a pretty stripped down model. The only option was heated seats. And so it had no keyless entry, which is shocking because I just feel like that should be standard on anything deemed luxury. And also, no adaptive cruise control, no lane centering, which is okay, but this doesn't even have lane departure warning or assist. Like it is the spec the same as my Miata, except my 10-year-old Miata does have keyless entry. So that's a bit puzzling. So I don't know. Maybe it's like when you think about what does luxury mean, um, I guess this can be spec'd to luxury, but I just feel like you should get more as a standard. Like, why would Mercedes be okay with giving someone a vehicle with so little options? Are they really trying to penny pinch that way?
If I can play devil's advocate, part of this might be that, we're car reviewers. We drive a lot of vehicles, usually that aren't base spec, right? We're pretty used to
Hmm.
driving maxed out options, packages, looking at all the tech. So when we do get a base spec vehicle, it's an interesting opportunity, but it also reminds us, I think, how, especially with luxury brands, how stripped down you are on features. Like you were saying, all of those safety features, which come standard on any modern Mazda, Honda, Toyota product, they're just add-ons on this rather expensive Mercedes.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of disappointing. But so yeah, when I drove this, I was like, initially, I was like, oh, this is nice. It's an electric, basically GLB, because I spent a lot of time with the GLB back when we had it last year, or I guess earlier this year. I don't know when that was, which was, the gas version of this vehicle. So perhaps we should rewind a little bit. This is a basically electrified version of an existing gas platform, which we've seen before. That's nothing new. We've seen this done by Volvo. We've seen this done by BMW with the i4. That's a whole other podcast topic for another day as far as like platform development and sharing. But for this one, it is compromised in some ways. But honestly, I would have felt way more luxurious inside of it if it had some of those basic options. And I almost feel like I would have rather they just had a higher entry level price and just let people opt for that. And it comes with more options. I guess it's marring the brand a little bit if you sell something this base, especially because perhaps some rental companies would sell this. Because who would actually like buy this spec is what I'm trying to wonder.
This does
Because
have fleet vehicle written over it a lot because it does have, like, getting in it, it did have that impressive Mercedes presence. It's not just the badge, it has that cool lighting. I think they do a great job of the interior lighting. The material quality was decent. The seats were very comfortable. So it got those basics right, I thought, pretty
yeah.
well.
Yeah, that's true. The ambient lighting is excellent, like better than like anyone else's. So it's hard to compare it to like you said, we just drove the EQE last week, and that felt luxurious, genuinely. But that was also a ground up EV. It's also a bit more expensive, E class versus B class. I get it, they're not on the same level. This is a bit more of a taste of this actually reminded me of Mercedes in Europe, where they have more cheaper models than we get in the US because in Europe, Mercedes is not just luxury, it's also they have entry level models that we've never seen before. This
Hmm.
does not this is like that weird middle ground because on one hand, it's a electric SUV with decent range, decent charging, pretty bad charging, but like sort of decent. I guess you're about to find out. Um, but it's all about the curve. And so when you think about, like, for example, comparing it to other things that are pitched as luxury SUVs, the Audi e-tron, not the Q4, but the old e-tron, that one didn't have great charging, but the curve was decent. Like it held that peak speed that it could do for a long time, which means it really doesn't charge that slowly. I have a feeling this is the same way. It just doesn't really know what it needs to charge. Like when I plugged it in before this range test, it said 1 hour to full, and then after 12 minutes, it was full. I mean, I plugged in at pretty high state of charge, but it just had no idea. So there seems to be some quirks about it. The brake pedal feel is weird. It just
About the
doesn't.
brakes,
What? Oh,
there's a
sure.
lot of
Let's
thoughts.
yeah, let's talk about the. So it's weird because it's like an EV that doesn't really act like an EV like
And
most of
here's
us
where
know.
I was saying with my earlier point. This is a great EV for people who aren't EV nerds, right? Like if you're getting out of a
Yeah.
Model Y or you're considering a Cadillac Lyric or something and
Hmm.
cross shopping with this, don't. It's a different kind of vehicle. However, let's say you are getting out of that kind of B, C class Mercedes product or another luxury in ICE vehicle with a torque converter automatic. This is going to feel familiar because it has creep. And I hope you like creep because I could not figure out a way to turn that creep off. So, what I mean by that is even though you have paddle shifters on the steering wheel, you can go between drive, drive plus, and drive minus. Drive plus being coasting, drive minus being the most regen, drive being somewhere in the middle. Even if you're in drive minus, where it has the most regen, once you go below 10 miles an hour, it switches from very, I'll say, quite aggressive regen, which I was impressed by,
Yeah.
to basically no regen and then just constant creep where there's not even I couldn't find a hold function, which a lot of gas cars these days have, like a hold function for traffic where you uh, tap on the brake pedal and the car stays in place. This, to my knowledge, I couldn't figure out a way to do that aside from selecting the park gear. So
Their
it's
priority
very, yeah.
Yeah, their priorities are just like different. Like for example, I think as basically a Honda Civic as standard can come with brake hold, which this doesn't have, which is strange. Honda Civic as standard, I don't know about standard, but um, for half this price, you can get a Honda Civic with really good like self-drive, not fully self-driving, but kind of a almost level two quality system of like lane keep assist, like lane centering, adaptive cruise control, heated and ventilated seats, heated rear seats. Like all the options this is missing can be found in a different car for half the price. And I will say, perhaps boldly, but people might disagree. The material quality feels comparable to like a Honda Accord or something. It looks better. Like I think this looks more premium, but when you actually start touching things in the interior, you start to realize this is B class, not E class.
I feel like that's always been, I mean, that's the luxury segment in a nutshell, right?
Exactly.
You
Yeah.
pay more and you get diminishing returns for that. That's just always the way it's been. It's interesting to see Mercedes carrying that over into their EVs because thus far, right, the EVs we've seen from them have been higher end. So this is the first time we're really seeing the equivalent of like, let's say you mentioned it earlier, right, the Audi Q4 e-tron, right, a kind of mid to lower spec luxury vehicle.
Mhm.
So I think part of it might just be we have to adjust, right? We've been in a lot of high end, very nice EVs. This is our first time being in a very mainstream EV.
Yeah.
Granted, it's not exactly priced like a mainstream EV, even compared to luxury competition like that Q4 e-tron. This is a little bit more expensive.
Yeah. And I guess it depends what you're looking for in a car because even the Q4 e-tron, which is pitched as a more premium ID4, is lacking some things that ID4 tends to do better. It's just weird. Like this whole expectation based around one brand, and there's other brands pushing the limits. Like, for example, I felt like for this price, actually for cheaper, I'd be happier in an Ionic 5 or an EV6 that would have more options, feel, I don't know about more luxurious, but just like different luxurious. It's just like pushing the bars what luxurious even means. And I think for a lot of people, for a while, luxurious was kind of like a little bit futuristic, but also a little bit classy, just like bridging that gap, which I feel like Ioniq 5 does well. And then you throw in GV60, which sure, Genesis is the premium brand over Kia and Hyundai. And that's like the same price as this and feels infinitely better, infinitely faster. The charging is like 2.5x the speed. Everything is better. And so I'm just like trying to think of who would actually buy this. If, I mean, obviously people who are like, I want a Mercedes SUV and it's electric, so this is your only option. But if you're not tied to the Mercedes badge, who is buying this and why?
Well, I think the fact that it shares a platform with the GLB, that it looks a lot like the GLB, and that it drives a lot like the GLB despite being an EV, those are all pluses for people who want to adopt this, who I think mostly will be Mercedes brand loyalists, or of course, people
Mm-hmm.
shopping in that luxury segment. So it's giving you all that, and it's doing it. Just like a GLB. It's not even much faster than its gas equivalent. I think, like, if you pulled up to, let's say, a stoplight and you saw even a base spec, like lowest of the low Model Y, you'd have to start sweating because I don't think you'd beat it in this.
Yeah, it's funny. The GLB technically, I guess depending on spec, goes 6.9 seconds 0 to 60, which is zero point 0.1 seconds faster than the base EQB, which is
Right. We
funny.
were driving a 350 though, which this does 6 seconds flat, right?
Yeah, which is decent. That's on par with rear wheel drive Mustang Mach-E, which has the Mustang name tied to it. So that's a whole other podcast segment is like, what does performance SUV even mean? But for this one, it's an interesting placement. And on one hand, I am remembering that this can be spec'd with 7 seats. Sure, so can the Model Y, but the Model Y with 7 seats is a hilarious joke. I have tried that. This, sure, the back seats, if you hit the third row, are for children, but the boxy shape allows for that to be a bit more functional. And so, if you want an electric SUV with 7 seats, I mean, this is your only option under like 6 figures, I feel like.
And great visibility because of that boxy shape. I
Yeah.
noticed without any of the fancy, because it doesn't have a lot of them, but without any of the fancy technological aids, just looking at that rear view mirror, I was able to get a really great unimpeded view
Yeah.
of what's behind me. And I haven't been in the GLB before, but I take it to be, that that's the same. So it's nice to see that in a world of EVs all being these like sport back coupe styled things, it's nice to see a very traditional boxy SUV for people who want that.
Yeah, exactly. I like the GLB styling. I like this styling, and I like that they didn't like make it all weird. If anything, they just made it a little bit better. That blade light look behind it is pretty cool. The grill kind of blocked out is, yeah, I guess that's very Mercedes EQ styling. It looks like it fits in the lineup, which is almost surprising because this is not ground.
Mechanically, it doesn't.
Yeah, mechanically
Yeah.
it's kind of weird. You open the lid or the hood, and it's just like kind of a weird mess, just like a lot of other adopted EVs, like the Mazda MX-30, for example. So I guess I'll wrap up first of all by mentioning go watch Out of Spec reviews. Kyle did a really good video. It's 37 minutes long, covering the EQB 300 and 350. Both are 4MATIC, so four-wheel drive. So that's, I mean, it's got its place. I get that, but it's an interesting thing to think about is what is luxury, and can they really get away with saying this is a luxury EV if it's able to be spec'd this way for this amount of money? It's just that costs return analysis, and I struggle to see it, but I mean, we want to know your all's thoughts in the comments.
Yeah. Let us know. Like, is this luxury? And like you were saying, Jordan, GV60, that exists. It almost feels like a trap card mentioning any of the Hyundai Motor Group products because they're so good. But every time, yeah, like they're the, you got to mention them because they exist. They're out there. And if you can get your hands on one, the value proposition of one of those seems to make this kind of questionable.
Yeah, but we want to hear your thoughts, and if you disagree, tell us why, because we could be wrong. And actually, it is such a personal thing. I mean, a car is like clothes. Like, you can't just tell someone they're wrong, even if they are dressed questionably. So, let us know what your thoughts are on the EQB. Check out our EQB content on Out of Spec Reviews. Got a range test coming up, charge test. We already have reviews on this car. It's interesting. Let us know your thoughts, and we'll see you all on another episode very soon.